So type of data basically involves the primary data and secondary data. Okay, now secondary data, we can use the competitors' analysis data, competitive intelligence data, or the company database, such as the financial report and so on and so forth. Industry reports such as the IBIS World report can also be used. That's one that I actually published. Okay, so you can also use that one. Okay, now after we make that decision about the secondary data, we then need to decide the other issues. But before that, I just want to briefly discuss these the next stages in our research process, and we move on to our discussion with the research plan. After we discuss about the research plan, we actually implement it, collecting and analyzing data. So we interview the respondents or any research activities to collect the data. Then interpret it and report the findings accordingly. Okay. All right. So we discussed that, defining problems. Okay. Just in terms of defining a problem, there are several types of research approaches that we can use in terms of defining a problem. The exploratory research, for instance, is one of them. Oh, okay. IBIS World reports. You can find, if you go to the learning portal, there are 2 IBIS World reports that I uploaded related to chocolate product industry. Chocolate industry. Okay. Look at the learning portal. If you can't find it, send me an email. Okay. I would recommend you to use it to substantiate your arguments in your assessments. Okay. Right. Oops. And exploratory research is normally conducted by marketers or social researchers to help them understand the problem further. That suggests further research. Okay, here we normally use qualitative research such as observation or any other qualitative technique, like focus group discussion, for instance. Okay, descriptive research is used to describe the issues. We normally use quantitative research like survey. And causal research, normally we try to develop a theory, testing the hypothesis. Therefore, we normally use statistical tools to help us testing the hypothesis. And in terms of causal research, we normally use experimental studies. So where we actually develop hypotheses from statistic perspective, we develop these hypothesis statements, such as H0 and also HA, basically, and we test it using the statistical tools. Okay. Right. So here we are in terms of types of data, and the next decision that we need to make when it comes to research plan is the techniques that we want to use. Okay, qualitative and quantitative. Broadly speaking, we have 2 types of techniques: qualitative and quantitative. The qualitative research includes a small number of individuals. Okay, focus group discussion is the popular technique. In-depth interview is another one, and also observation is also popular in marketing research. As a marketer, we may want to go to the store, for instance, to observe how consumers behave in the purchase, in the place of purchase. Okay, the outcome is basically about words and opinion. Now, in terms of words and opinion, we may have a bunch of information that may be hard for us to analyze, and some companies develop the software to help us clustering the words to be more meaningful for us to generate the insights. Okay, Leximancer and Envivo, for instance, are a couple of examples in terms of helping us clustering the words or opinion that the respondents have spoken. Okay, the next one is quantitative research. This one normally includes more than 100 people when it comes to a lot of people. And we use survey normally, and we also use statistical tools to measure it. Okay. Well, I'm not going to talk about this one here, and this is the one that I just spoke briefly about, the observational survey and experimental research. Okay. The next decision that we need to make is basically about the contact method, whether we are going to reach them through mail, telephone, or personal interview, or online, which the online technique contact method has gained a lot of attention from people because it is more accurate. It is reaching the target respondents more accurately than the others. Okay, and the response rate is also quite good compared to the others. Personal interview is probably the best still because you can also look at the body language, but the problem is the cost is very expensive, and there is a tendency that people may reject the the interviewer. Okay, now this is the last decision that we need to make: sampling plan when it comes to research plan. So sampling plan includes 3 decisions. The first one is sampling units. That is actually about who the respondent that we need to research, or it is about the profile of the respondent. The next one is sample size, which is basically how many people, how many respondents that we want to include in our research. Okay. For qualitative, we decide the number of groups for focus group discussion, how many groups, how many focus group discussion that we want to conduct. As a rule of thumb, marketers would normally nominate 2 groups for each respondent profile. Let's say we have our target market, we want to research our target market because we want to understand the customer satisfaction, okay? And our target market is basically from age perspective, they are at the age of 20 to 50. And then we break them down into several several groups, 20 to 30, 31 to 40, and so on and so forth, because we can't put everybody from 20 to 50 in the same focus group discussion room because they have different values, they may have different values, they may have different lifestyle, so they may not be comfortable to talk one to another, okay? And grouping them will also be more meaningful for us to generate the insights, okay? So let's say we agree to group them based on those classifications, okay? And we normally nominate 2 groups for each respondent profile, okay? 2 groups here, 2 groups there, and so on and so forth, right? In saying that, I also need to highlight to you that number of groups is also determined by the budget that we have. If we have limited budgets, we may want to focus on the core group, the core profile of the respondents. And for the core profile, we nominate 2 groups, and the others, we only nominate 1 group for the other profile, okay? For quantitative, we normally get the research agency to help us defining the right sample size, considering the confidence interval and also the margin of error. They'll be able to help us considering the population size as well, to determine the number of respondents that we need to interview. Okay, and the next one, sampling procedure, which is basically about probability and non-probability technique to determine how to select the respondent. So if in the population we have John, Robert, Mary, Cynthia, Sue, and so on and so forth, then the sampling procedure should be able to tell us why do we have to select John, not Robert, for instance. Okay, so that's actually related to the sampling procedure. Okay, right. So that's basically the marketing research topic. Any questions, guys, before we move on to the next topic, which is basically about the segmentation, targeting, positioning, or core strategy of marketing? Okay. Oh, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Simon, for confirming. Okay, let's move on to the next topic. And after that, I do expect that you still have time. I know that I made a bit of mistake in terms of my selecting the wrong link. Okay, and let me just, okay, so I do expect that you can download the files that I uploaded in the discussion forum. Make sure that for your assessment one, you look at the IBIS Word reports and also Module 1 and Module 2 presentations. Okay, could access Module 1. Okay, hopefully you can also access all modules, Simon, because I've uploaded all files, all presentation files until Module 6, actually. Okay, if you have problem, please do let me know. Okay, right now this is basically about the strategy that we are going to discuss, and just briefly about the strategic planning. Strategic planning is actually the process where the company assesses their strategic fits between their goals and the changing marketing opportunities. All right. So in a nutshell, we know that the environment out there is a constant change. Okay. The legislation may change when we change the government. The new government in office may change the legislation. They may introduce a set of new legislation that may affect our ability to compete in the market. Okay. By the way, the word strategy itself comes from the military language, actually, military vocabulary. All right. So we know that in military, in the context of military, it's always try to win, right, in the competition. Okay. So yes, it is changing, and we need to understand whether we have what it takes to achieve the goals, to achieve our organization's goals. Although the environment out there is a constant change. Okay, in doing so, we need to revisit the capabilities that we have. Probably we need to acquire new capabilities using the other capability like our financial resources. Okay, so we need to acquire that probably. Okay, we need to acquire new talent, for instance. Okay, we need to acquire new technologies, new machinery, for instance, to be able to compete in this industry. Okay. Okay, so briefly I talk about the market out there is a constant change. Okay, well, what is the example? Simple. You can, I think you may still recall that my question about the mobile phone category, who was the market leader 20 years ago and who is the market leader now? Okay, it is a constant change. Okay, so the company needs to think about how they adjust to, or how they proactively develop their strategy to make sure that they can manage the environment. Okay, Sony is an example. For instance, when they just founded the business, when Akio Morita and his friends just founded the company, one of the products that they launched was a rice cooker. Where is the rice cooker now? Okay, and what do we know about Sony now? Well, Sony, if we ask that question again, we know some products such as audio system, for instance, TV, and the other entertainment category. So in a nutshell, they are actually in entertainment industry. They are not in consumer electronics such as aircon. They are not going to launch aircon, for instance, or fridge or microwave, for instance. Okay, that is not the definition of the company. Right, that is how they define this is not related to how they define their competition at the moment. Okay, so that's the strategic planning that we bring to the table. Okay, and I'm not going to discuss about these steps in terms of strategic planning. Just briefly about the market-oriented mission. We recommend people to look at the market-oriented mission statement. Where we have 4 criteria basically. It is based on satisfying basic customer needs. Okay, when you write the mission statement, please refer to the basic customer need. It has to be meaningful and specific yet motivating, because you're going to communicate your mission statement to everybody else, and it's also based on the strength that you have in the marketplace. So not stated in sales and profit terms. So my mission is to achieve $1 million extra business. Well, that is not how we write a market-oriented mission statement. Okay. A bit of example here. Converting Amazon mission statement from a product-oriented mission statement to market-oriented. If you look at that, the words in italic are basically related to their strength and also the basic customers' needs. Okay, so that's what the customers want, and that's basically the areas that they strive to build their capability on. Okay. Vision statement is a different one. It is basically about the strategic intent. Where do we want to go? Okay, in the next 3 years' time, 5 years' time, or 10 years' time. Okay, therefore, it requires us to do some audit. This is where we are at. Okay, at the moment, this is our market share. This is how the customers perceive us, perceive our brand, and so on and so forth. And in the next 3 years' time, this is what we want to go. This is where we want to be. Okay. And between now and the next 3 years' time, where's the gap? And how do we fulfill the gap? By acquiring new capabilities. Okay, so that's basically the vision statement all about. Okay, company objectives is another strategic objective is another vocabulary in the strategic plan. Some people differentiate the term goal and objective, but look, as long as we are consistent, we'll be fine when it comes to writing a marketing objective, because in my observation, the companies that use the term goal, they also specify them, right, using SMART principle, okay? Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timed, okay? And now, this is basically about the types of metrics that marketers normally consider. There are two types of metrics. The first one is financial related metrics. You can see that here we talk about anything related to dollars, like sales, profit, or ROI, and the other one is non-financial metrics. They are basically the other variables that affect the achievement of financial metrics. So the non-financial metrics include market share, the customer satisfaction that we just talked about, the customer loyalty, the brand, the innovation, okay? And in today's business landscape, we can also include digital metrics. Digital metrics such as the bounce rate, for instance, the customer digital engagement, for instance, whether they share our posting or not, whether they post their comments on our comments or not, okay? And so on and so forth. That is basically the non-financial metric. From marketing perspective, again, our role here is actually to show that the achievements of non-financial metrics or marketing metrics contribute to the financial metrics, okay? Because the financial metrics are basically controlled by the entire company, including sales department, HR department, manufacturing department, and so on and so forth. And we contribute that through developing or achieving the marketing metrics, okay? Right, I'm going to skip that. Now let's look at the SDP, which is basically our core discussion for today. Okay, just for the segmentation, targeting, positioning, you may recall that we discussed briefly about customer-driven marketing strategy. If we expand our discussion about customer-driven marketing strategy, we have two questions here. The first one is the customers. The question about customers revolves around segmentation and targeting. Okay. And then the next one is about the value proposition decision that includes the differentiation strategy and also the positioning strategy. Okay, so in terms of segmentation, we have what we call as 4 segmentation variables. But before we move to that spot, let me just briefly take you through about what market segmentation is. If we have the entire population here, let's say 20 million people and 24 million people in Australia, not everybody is relevant to our business. Okay, so we discount those who are not relevant to our business. Okay, so when we put them into smaller group based on similar characteristics, it is actually what we call as conducting segmentation analysis. In other words, segmentation is actually the process of dividing a large population into smaller market segments based on similarities and differences. Okay, so I use the term similarities and differences in here. What it means is actually, if we go back to that to this population, we have large population, we group them into smaller market segments. Let's say if we conduct a thorough market research, we'll come up with 6 to 8 market segments, okay? After we discount the others who are not relevant to our business, okay? So let's say we have segment A, segment B, segment C, and so on and so forth, okay? The members in one segment, like segment A, should share similar characteristics, okay? And if we compare the members of segment A to segment B, they should be different. Otherwise, there is no reason why we put them into 2 different market segments, okay? So that's the logic behind a segmentation, okay? The next question is, why do we have to why do we do market segmentation analysis? Well, because if we don't do that, that means we are actually we may exhaust our resources without us having the opportunity to achieve our objective. Okay, so it is more into the effectiveness of our marketing activities, our marketing campaign, our marketing resources to achieve the objectives. Therefore, we focus on specific targets rather than we talk to everybody. Okay, all right. So that's basically segmentation. Now in terms of segmentation, we have more than one approach. Like, if we segment a group of animals, for instance, we can segment them in many ways. The same thing to our consumer. We can segment our consumer based on a number of approaches. The one that we learn in here is basically the 4 segmentation variables that I'm going to recommend you to use for your assessment too. Okay, for your assessment too. Okay. Geographic segmentation is basically based on geographical units such as nations, regions, states, counties, cities, or even neighborhoods. So when you say your target market consists those who live in the key cities in Australia, such as Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, and so on and so forth, you basically use geographic segmentation variable. Okay. The next one is the demographic segmentation. Now, you remember that a couple of weeks ago we discussed about demographic environmental force. Okay. We use we may use the same data, the population data for demographic, for instance, but the purpose is different. The purpose of demographic segmentation analysis is to determine who will be the customers, right? Who will be our customers? Who is the group of people that we expect to buy our product or service, okay? So we use demographic variables such as age, gender, family size, and so on and so forth, income, occupation, and so on and so forth, okay? The demographic segmentation variable is quite popular, but let me highlight to you that if we only use demographic segmentation variable, it is not insightful for our strategy, because the same group of people who belong to the same demographic variable, such as age or income, for instance, may have different needs. Okay, for instance, not everybody in this forum buy iPad, for instance. Okay, not everybody in this forum buy iPhone, for instance. So that reflects different needs. Okay, so therefore, although demographic segmentation variable helps us to profile the customer in a more in a clearer way, it doesn't help us a lot if we don't analyze the other variables such as geographic, psychographic, and behavioral. Okay. Psychographic helps us understanding our target market based on their lifestyle, their values, their social class, personalities. Okay, so when you explain that your target market is basically those who have outdoor lifestyle, for instance, you are using the psychographic segmentation variable. Behavioral is actually helping us segmenting the customers based on their attitudes and knowledge. Okay, the attitude and knowledge of the customers, specifically, it can be about the how they use the product, whether they use it every day. Some products may require the customers to use it every day in the morning, like breakfast cereal, for instance. sanitary napkin, for instance, the customers use it every month, for instance, okay? And based on the customer's loyalty as well, or how they purchase pattern of this product category. So if we segment the customers based on those variables, we actually use the behavioral segmentation variable, okay? Roy Morgan value segment is interesting. I'm going to email you the, I think the discussion forum also gives you a link. I apologize, the learning resource also give you a link to strategic business insight value segments. As a matter of interest, you can click that link to understand which value segment that you belong to. They normally nominate 2 value segments for you, either this and that. So that's a tendency, okay? So Roy Morgan value segment is another approach. Look, for your assessment tool later on, we are going to discuss this more detail, guys. You need to use the 4 segmentation variables, and if you also use Roy Morgan value segments, right? You nominate 1 or 2. Show the link between your Roy Morgan value segment and the 4 segmentation variables. Right? That's brilliant. Okay, you actually define the customers, target customers in a better way. Okay, all right. Briefly about the B2B marketing. I'm not going to discuss this a lot because again, I recommend you to analyze consumer markets. The next thing I'd like to discuss briefly is the targeting strategy. Now, in terms of targeting strategies, there are 3 perspectives that determine the target marketing strategies that the company adopts. The first one is basically view the market as the same. Everybody is just the same. Okay, so the company that adopts this strategy normally offers one thing for everybody, one for everybody. Okay, so that leads us to what we call as undifferentiated targeting strategy or mass marketing strategy. Okay, now again, in today's business landscape, unless you are the monopoly holder, it is hard for you to adopt this strategy. Okay, and this next thing is the opposite of this perspective. Basically views the customers as different. All customers are different. Therefore, we need to customize it. We need to customize our offering. Okay, this leads us to what we call as micro marketing. Okay, small business is quite good in this instance. All right, hairdresser, tailor, for instance, will talk to you. How would you like your hair? How would you like to get your hair cut? Okay, they customize it to your needs. Okay, business to business marketing also has some ability to adjust their offering to meet specific customers' needs. Okay, and the next one is in between these 2 opposite views, we have what we call as they are different, but we can group them. The customers are different, but we can group them. This leads us to what we call as differentiated segmentation strategy, a differentiated target marketing strategy, or segmented targeting strategy. Okay. And in this instance, we also have, in this instance, we also have the concentrated targeting strategy and differentiated targeting strategy with this approach. Okay, so hopefully this slide shows us the different target market strategies. Okay, all right, now and that's the diagram. Hopefully that the diagram helps us to understand each targeting strategy. Yeah, the undifferentiated, concentrated, differentiated, and micro targeting strategy. Okay. Right. So the next one I'd like to discuss with you is the value proposition before move on to the positioning.